It sounds maybe cheesy, but I always come back to the fact that like this is the little human I love more than anything in this world. This is the human that I will do anything for, right? And if this is what my human needs, then damn it, I figure out how to make it happen, right? And it's my job to change. It's my job to adjust. It's not their job to adjust to me, right? They are their own independent entity in this world, going their own route, as we all are. And if we want to be in this space together, then it's our job to work with each other to figure out how to make that happen. It's not my job to control their choices. It's not my job to, that's not what parenting is. Parenting is not about controlling the choices of our children.
Great title for a podcast, Blessings.
Thank you. Yes, I love it.
What a great meditation.
We are here to learn in the spirit of life.
I'm all about believe. You're about spreading blessings. It's great.
What about your blessings? What's the biggest blessing of life?
What a great question.
Because it's the Blessings podcast, I have to ask you, what is your biggest lesson in life?
My biggest lesson in life.
A whole lot of conversations with people about life and how those things manifest as blessings and lessons, and sometimes both.
It's my connection.
You're going to get schooled.
The journey is the journey.
What you and me are searching for are the blessings in this life.
Remember the reality of how sweet people are.
Spread blessings around the world.
You are the most remarkable energy. You make me pause, make me excited, make me think, and make me spontaneously come up with an answer. This is another one of those great moments in time in my life. Thank you for reaching out to ask if I would do the show.
Welcome back to Blessings, everyone. Maryann Lombardi joins me today, and she is all about the fit. She says that when the fit is off, it's harder to find satisfaction or fulfillment. She works with people to find the best fit. She is a best-selling author and former executive turned business founder. She has spent the past 20 plus years working for governments, institutions, and brands, bringing together billion-dollar partners and leveraging their resources to support thousands of people in getting jobs, accessing free therapy, and growing their businesses. Her wonderfully witty book of essays is called It's Your Story to Tell, where she explores the deeper nuances of fit when the term applies to identity. She's serious, but man, is she funny. Maryann has a way of putting things that's very intellectual and that opens your mind. Plus, it makes you consider alternative vantage points, and it has you laughing along the way. I saw a lot of myself in her writing, even though there were things about her life that are the opposite of mine. Yet we are the same. And that is the essence of what I believe about humanity. I heard someone say this the other day, and I'm including it in my introduction because it really stuck with me. We humans are all here on this planet at the same time, this particular group of us right now. And every 100 years or so, there's a whole new group. This group that you're here with now is your crew. These are your people. These are the people who are here with you now. We are all a part of the same crew. Love it or hate it. And it's just, we're all just making our way. And wow, this kind of made me think about the people that I see as I go through my life. These are my crew members. If I'm tempted to get annoyed with someone, it shifted my thinking. And now I'm thinking, wow, that's a member of my crew. Maybe they're just having a bad day. And I think about this now as I go through life. This is my team, my Earth team. So I want to welcome a fellow member of the Earth team and a person with a unique perspective on life and a brand new book, which is called Snowflakes, Zebras, and Fingerprints: How to Find Your Next Career Move and Stand Out in a Job Market That Expects You to Fit In. She's somebody you need to hear. And I'm so glad to be able to speak with you today, Maryann. Thank you for indulging me in that long introduction.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. And I love this idea of these are the people, your crew, you're sharing the earth with right now, because I think that's absolutely true. But we don't really think of it that way.
No, we don't. We're trying to oppose one another at different points. And really, we should be embracing that we all get to be here right now together. This is amazing. It's amazing. It's a miracle.
Yeah. And it's cool that we're all different.
Exactly.
I understand that so often we want to be drawn to the people that are like us, that are the same. But I always find that I'm much more excited about being around the people who are different than me, because I learn more, I experience more, I share more. Like, it's just this, I don't know, it makes my life richer.
Yes. And it exposes you to the parts of yourself that you may need to take a better look at.
Yeah. Yeah, none of us are fixed, right? None of us are set in a way that is unchangeable, right? And I get that there is comfort in that stability. There is comfort in that. And I guess I've always felt like if we're too stuck, right, it's too easy for us to lose sight of the bigger picture, right? Of that we're sharing this world with all of our earth friends, our crew.
Yes. I love this quote from your book of essays. Things that confine us have a way of pushing us to break free. I'm going to take that a step further and say that when we feel confined, that is a signaling to the place where we need to break free of something. It's an opportunity for freedom. So, how do we break free of the things that confine us that might be preventing us from embracing that crew mentality?
I think the first piece of this is understanding that we're confined in the first place, right? Because that assessment and understanding is the root or the foundation of actually making a change. And too often we don't really want to look at those things. We don't want to dig into them because then that faces us with the question of, are we willing to change? And I think in many ways that first book that you're talking about was one of those adventures for me, which is if I really want to actually look at these things, then I have to actually make a change, right? I have to ask myself, do I want to break free of that, right? And so I think for all of us, if we're unwilling to look at who we are and assess those things, then we're going to stay in that confined space. But sometimes that comfort of that trappedness keeps us stuck there, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to get unstuck.
Yeah. And we're going to keep getting the signals until we get the message.
Yeah, very true. Right. It comes out in one way or another. Right.
Yeah, it does. It does. That's true. There is a really awesome photograph of you on your website, and you're sitting on a counter. You got a phone in your hand, and there's a book next to you that's entitled "Fuck Off, I'm Coloring." And I love that picture so much. It's an adult coloring book, and I just burst out laughing when I saw it because it's so subtle. It's such an incredible metaphor for life. And I'll bet many people wouldn't even notice that book in the photo, but it spoke so loudly of your humor and also of the idea that honoring your inner child is serious business. Self-care should be, and maybe it should be hardcore. And so what do you have to say about this image? What does it mean to you? Can you interpret it or give us something about your identity related to that image on your website?
Yeah, one of the things is that I like wine. So there's that piece of it. The other piece of it, when it comes to that coloring book, the basics is I like to color, right? I think that there's a side of us that is still part of our childhood, right? And there is something incredibly satisfying of taking a crayon or a colored pencil or anything and just coloring inside the lines. Because so much of our lives expect us to have to navigate things that are in lines and out of lines and chaos and control. And they're a big jumble of experiences and circumstances and expectations. And life is complicated. It's messy. But there's something really satisfying about a coloring book because the only thing you have to think about is the color that you want, right? What pleases you. And then it provides you this nice little line that in a little box, a little shape that you can color. And once you do that, when you look at it, you can step back and it feels good and clean and orderly, right? In a life that is less. And so I have always found this real power in that experience. And I reconnected with coloring during the pandemic because I was trying to find things to do. And it was puzzles and coloring.
I love that. I actually reconnected with some of the same things. It's funny. There is a research on coloring. I've actually done that research and the benefits of actually coloring as an adult. And also, I have under my coffee table in my living room a coloring book with markers for anybody who happens to come over and wants to just pull it out and start coloring. It's just such a fun thing to do. I love that. And also, you bring up a really interesting point. You said all you need to do is pick out the color that you want. And I have spoken to a couple of people who were experiencing difficult times, and they had trouble identifying what were their favorite things, like their favorite colors. And so it's an exercise in knowing yourself also, in deciding what are my favorite colors.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that we can spend a lot of time serving and caring for other people and other people's needs, that it is easier than you would think to lose sight of your own.
That's right. A big part of self-care is taking the time to think about the things that are important to you. What are your favorite things? Simple question like that, because you can lose sight of that. You can lose touch with that very easily.
Yeah, you can lose touch with what your favorite things are, and you can easily also lose touch with what you want, because often we don't take the time to step back and think to ourselves, no, wait a second, what do I really want? We certainly know what everybody else around us wants and how we can help them get what they want, and how those wants maybe intersect in some ways to us wanting that for them. But rarely does somebody stop and ask us, what do you want? Independent of what they want, especially if we have partners and we have kids and we have, like, our wants are integrally tied to everybody else's wants. So it's a whole new thing to step back and wait a second, what do I want independent of all of that? What do I like independent of all of that?
Exactly. And it's such an important question. It's an exercise I think people should do periodically.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about your life. You said you were born in 1972. I was 6 years old then. And this really struck me too. You said that was the year that Helen Reddy put out her famous song, I Am Woman. And I want you to know, I also have a connection to Helen Reddy, because 3 years later, and I had to look this up, but in 1975, I was 9, and she put out her Helen Reddy's Greatest Hits album. And my mom got it in that collection of you could buy got 12 albums for 5 cents or something like that. And that was one of them that she got. And I listened to that album and belted out those songs on repeat at 9 years old. I was in love with Helen Reddy, and I just belted it out. And so I can also hear her voice in my head now. And you said the same thing. She has a very distinct voice. So something about Helen Reddy hit us hard in the 70s. How do you think being a child of the 70s helped to shape you?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. It's interesting. I feel in some ways being a child of the 80s shaped me. Like, I feel like I can think about that more actively than being a child of the 70s, because I feel like I was so young. And so it was more about being a child of my parents in the 70s, because my parents and my upbringing and my lifestyle and all of that kind of stuff really drove a lot of those choices, right? And so I feel like my independence in the 80s was a lot more apparent to me. And so I think about that decade, especially as a Gen Xer, as something that is a much more present thing to me than being a child of the 70s. But you're absolutely right. If you look at the decade, if you look at the numbers, I'm absolutely a child of the 70s. My first 8 years were there. I think Helen Reddy is such an interesting one because she's such an icon of multiple decades. But for me, I got connected to her through Pete's Dragon, through this animated movie. And so as much as I would love to say that it was I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar as the song that really touched me and captured me, it was much later that I really discovered that side of her music, really understanding all that she had to say, who she was, the impact that she had. And so in some ways, that's stuff I understood when I was a little older and in the 80s, right? What I knew of her was that she voiced this woman and sung on a balcony of a lighthouse during that movie. So it's always interesting to me how we come to those things that have such a power to us, because even to this day, I hear her voice and it hits something very deeply in me.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's because I saw her standing on that lighthouse singing this song, wanting something that she didn't have, and her independence in that really struck a chord in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is really interesting that if you think of it from that standpoint, and going back to what we were talking about with the crew, your Earth crew, people come into your life, and even if they're not people personally, like a celebrity or a singer or someone like that, they come into your life for a reason, and they're there to show you something. And you might not even see what it is for years down the road. You know?
Oh, I think that's totally true. Yeah. And I think that happens with experiences too. One of the things that I love about writing is that and at least the way I do it is it requires me to revisit moments of my past and see them from the state I'm in my present, right? And it makes these connections in ways that I'm not sure I would spend the time to think about in the same kind of active way if I wasn't writing about them. And so I find that there are experiences I've had when I was younger that now I look back and I go, oh my God, that makes so much sense to me. It makes so much sense to me now because of that experience that I've had when I was younger. But like this self-care thing you're talking about, I feel like we need reasons to thread that needle. We need reasons to do that kind of stitching because we're so focused on work, we're so focused on life, we're so focused on caring for other people, we're so focused on doing and making the most out of our doing that we don't spend a lot of time stopping and sitting and thinking. And that's a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah. You do so much self-reflection, and it's really something that a lot of people don't take the time to do, as you said. And I'm wondering, as you're talking, because your work is now helping people to find their best career fit primarily, right? And so the idea of taking the time to do that self-reflection, is that something that you think the lack of which contributes to people being dissatisfied in their work or not being able to find the right job or feeling unfulfilled?
Yes, I think it's a big piece of it. I also think that this market is kind of chaos, right? But often what happens is that we jump into careers, we jump into relationships, we jump into lives that often are defined for us and not defined by us. And I think work is very similar. And it's hard to quit, right? It's hard to quit something. It's hard to stop doing something that you have started. And then we get in these situations where we're trying to do this lie that is work-life balance, right? We're trying to balance all of these things. And really, there is no work-life balance, right? There's life. And your work's job is to support the life that you choose to live. Now, if you don't know what kind of life that you want to live, if you don't know those things, it's much harder to find an environment for work and build a work life that's going to support that thing, right? And so what we want to do is that we want to let our clients take a step back for a second, and we do some self-reflection. We step back and we go, okay, this is what you have been doing, right? This is the work that you have been doing. What's working and what's not working, right? Let's just assess that and figure that out. What do you want out of your life is the next step of it. And then we try to match those two things to find the right fit. It's not unlike what you do when you try to find a partner. You've been through a lot of partners, right? Before you find a mate and you go, this is what I like. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. And you try to err on the side of what works and not what side of what doesn't work. But it requires some self-reflection and some stopping to think about what you've experienced before taking the action to find that next opportunity.
Yeah. Self-awareness, I think, is the key to just about everything.
It is, but it feels inactive. It feels we want to take action. We want to do something. We want to solve the problem. We want to, from a work perspective, we want to apply for, we think if we apply for 800 jobs, then we have a better chance of finding the right job. But the reality is, if we just stopped for a second, figured out what it is we want, figured out what our skills and our experience are, and then just go seek out opportunities that match those things, we have a much higher chance of finding opportunity than we do if we're throwing spaghetti at a wall in the 800 applications.
Yes, that's right. And I also think that most people believe that they know themselves, but they really don't.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Yeah. You think, yeah, I know who I am. But when you really get down to brass tacks and start asking yourself some of those bigger questions, they're harder to answer than you think.
Well, and sometimes you just need help, right? Because we're in our own head all the time. Yeah. And so sometimes you need somebody else to be hearing what you're saying. That ends up being a lot of what I end up doing on the coaching side, because a lot of the work is this mix of learning and development and coaching, right? And a lot of what happens is that I ask a lot of questions and people talk a lot, and I start to pull out what they're saying and shape it in a way and re-ask them questions, right? And what you'll find when somebody else starts reflecting back to you what you're saying, you learn a bit more about who you are, because it's harder for us to hear it in our own head than it is to have somebody else reflect it back to us. So it's a very powerful thing to have a coach in that kind of way.
Yeah, definitely. I firmly believe in that. Making the investment in someone who can hold you accountable, an objective third party of your life, someone with a fresh set of eyes, it's invaluable. It's true.
Yeah. And especially when you're looking at that career space, because it's really all about shaping all the stuff that you have in a way that allows employers, allows your network to be able to send jobs your way, right? The kind of jobs that would be appropriate for you to do. So a lot of that is shaping and channeling what your skills and experience are to make it easier for people to help you.
Exactly. And your career choice is so important. It's going to be how you spend the majority of your time for many years.
Yeah. So it'd be nice to like it. You
It
don't have to
would.
like all of it, right? There's no such thing as perfect, but it'd be nice to make sure that it's in line with who you are and what you want to do, and you're treated
That's right.
well and you're paid well. And that's what we work to do.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's wonderful what you're doing for people in such a selfless way. And you have such an awareness, such a more global type of awareness of a holistic sense of all of the parts of a person that really fit together to make the person who they are and how they are walking around in the world. It's quite a skill what you do as well.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think we think that we're supposed to be one person at home and one person at work.
Yeah.
And there's this whole idea of, again, this work-life balance that we need to separate them. But the reality is, and especially for women, that we bring all of ourselves to work. Right.
Yeah.
There's no way not to, because we're on the phone with a doctor who called us and who needs something, and the school thing. So we're constantly in a world that's intersecting with each other. And so there's no way to thread that, like to cut those two things out. So the key is to figure out how can they seamlessly work together in a way that allows you to be effective at both, while making sure that your life is the primary and your work is the secondary.
Yeah. Okay. That's a beautiful frame. I love that.
My dad is 83 years young. Every morning, he sends my sister and I and all his grandchildren a good morning message. It's always something uplifting, positive, and encouraging. And it always says, "I love you." We all look forward to this, and we know that Granddad won't be around forever. So we really cherish these messages of love and empowerment. My dad loves to say, every day is a new opportunity. And that is what he taught me. That, along with how to work smarter, hold family dear, and go after my dreams. I know there are people out there who go through the motions every day with no one saying good morning, no encouraging word, and to support a positive mindset. And there are others who are doing all the right things, but still need a little nudge to create and maintain positive habits throughout the day. So in my dad's honor, I've created Your Positive Moment. Research clearly shows the benefits of positivity and connection. A recent Gallup poll showed a significant percentage of the world is lonely. Your Positive Moment solves these problems. These are messages that come directly to your phone first thing in the morning, so you can begin every day on a high note. The message includes a loving greeting, an affirmation, a daily reflection, and an easy action step to get you going in the direction of growth and fulfillment and transformation, and to help you stack up good habits. A simple daily message has the power to change your life. Get started with your beneficial morning message habit for free. yourpositivemoment.com.
Okay. So you are like me, a divorced single mom. And I love that you said in your book, the marriage doesn't make a home broken or complete. The people do. And I believe that's true. But I also know that I cling to sentiments like that because I do have guilt, and I see the undeniable ways that my children have suffered because of my divorce. So what are your thoughts on how to best support children in divorce to help them to feel unbroken?
One thing is just to believe that they are unbroken first. If you think your children are broken, if you think that your family is broken, then I think the language we use matters tremendously. Right. So I don't feel like my child comes from a broken home. They have two parents that love them dearly. They've got partners who also love them dearly. Like their father has a fiance, and they've got like this wonderful family that just has brought more people in who love them. Right. And yes, there are challenges to obviously having a divorced family, right? There's all such sorts of shit that goes down, right? There's no way to get around some of that conflict, right?
Yeah.
But the key to that is you can't control everything, right? There's no way we can control everything. The only thing that we can do is be loving and love our children and care for our children the best way that we possibly can. Our kids are resilient by nature. The younger they are, the more resilient they are, right? And they see, I do believe that they see in us how we can navigate that challenge. They see in us how we have stood up for ourselves. They see in us that how we navigate these things. And then they do their best to learn from that. But I think we also have to give ourselves a little bit of a break, right? And not try to control it all. All we can do is be kind to our partners the best we can, right? But we can't control what they do in a divorce. We can't control what the other party does. We can only control what we do and do our best to love our children, right? I don't think that's necessarily a tactical answer to this question, but I think it's a true one, right? Hugging our children a lot, telling them that we love them a lot, looking in the eyes of our partner when we do drop-offs. That's another thing I think that matters. Our kids see the little things, not the big things, right? The little things are the things that matter, right? When we can't look their other parent in the face at drop off and pick up, right? Or we can't shake their hands. I remember one time my kid said to me after a drop off and my father was with us, I can't remember exactly why, but they said, "Hey, why does Grampy hate Daddy?" And I was like, what? I was like, Grampy doesn't hate Daddy. And they were like, "Yeah, Grampy hates Daddy." And I was like, oh. So what did I do? I had to tell my father. I said, "Next time Cam's father, you have to get out of the car and shake his hand. I need you to do that." And my father's very protective of me. And I'm like, "No, you need to get out of that car and you need to shake his hand." And after that point, my kid didn't think Grandpa hated Daddy anymore. But it's like those kind of things are the things that really matter.
Yeah.
Is those moments.
Yeah.
And that's
they really
the best we can do.
I know. And I really admire you for having that viewpoint and for doing those things. And it can be hard when the other person doesn't reciprocate those types of things, which is the trouble. But yeah.
It is the trouble, but there is that idea of we can only do what we control.
That's right.
And the more we try to pretend we have control over the things that we don't have control, the added layer of stress and conflict that exists in us, right? And your kids know the difference, right?
Yeah,
like they can see in you working that way. They can see in you that you are making that effort, and that matters to them.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. Are you a spiritual person?
I am, yeah. I would not consider myself a religious person, but I am a spiritual person.
Because one of the ways I like to think about it when I start to feel that those bad feelings come in, if anything happens, that's a difficult circumstance having to do with my ex or the divorce, I like to think about how I believe that my children chose us as parents before they even came into this world. And that was for a reason, because there were things that they had to learn from us in particular. And so that kind of comforts me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you believe that or how you feel about something like that.
Yeah, you know what? I've always thought, and I don't know if this sounds selfish, but I have always thought that I was meant to have the child I had, because I feel like the relationship that I have with my child and what I have learned about me and my own resilience and my own power and my ability to have the kind of connection with another human that is uncomplicated. That my relationship with my child is the most uncomplicated thing in my life. It just makes sense. And I feel, as somebody who's always been striving and searching and doing and always in motion, my kid has taught me how to slow down. They have taught me how to love in this unconditional way. They have taught me how to be okay in change. They have taught me that I can do harder things than I thought I was capable of. And so that relationship that is so powerful to me, that I do feel like I was meant to parent this child, and this child was meant to teach me and to love me in a way that I could become a better person, right? So I think in that way, it is similar to that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I often think the same thing about myself as a parent. And I know your circumstances are really interesting because you have a child who is non-binary. And so I want to dig into that a little bit with you because you spend a lot of time in your book of essays talking about how this has helped you to explore your own identity. So, what are the biggest ways that you have seen the lessons from your child help you to connect to your own identity in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, I think that first book was really this exploration of that question because my child was willing at a young age to question their own identity, right? We gave them that determination of their gender and they said, yeah, no, I don't think so, right? And they did the very hard thing of questioning that and really working through that. And I was like, wow, there's so many things that I just take for granted that I've never questioned, right? And so it sent me down a rabbit hole to start asking myself some of those questions that either I've avoided or I've just never even thought to ask myself, right? I felt really privileged to be able to have that relationship with my child, for me to go through that with them and to rethink things that I've assumed and make me question my own identity, right? I've never questioned that I'm a woman, but why is that? Right. And so one of those essays is about, I feel very much like a woman, but is that because somebody told me I am, or is that because that's what I feel like? Right. I've always had issues with answering the question, where am I from? Right. Why can I not tell people where I'm from? Right. Does it feel dishonest to say I am from X? Right. And so I was like, maybe I need to investigate that. Why am I so attached to being my father's daughter? As a 52-year-old woman, why does that still feel like really anchored in me? What does that mean? So it was like untying all of these little threads of questions that I've never really explored before because it never occurred to me that I should. But I think that's a challenge when we don't do that. It goes back to our original point, right? It was, we started this, right? If we just take the assumptions of what we were provided, and especially as women, if we just take what we're given, we just take what people tell us we are and what we can do and what we should sound like and what we should look like, right? If we just take those and assume that's the right way, that then we're stuck in a world, and we're already stuck in a world that wasn't designed for us, right? But then we're stuck in an environment and circumstances that were not of our choosing. So I think it's really important, especially as women, to think through those choices. Is what you are doing for work, was that a choice you made? Or was it a choice that somebody else made for you? Where you are living right now, what got you there? Why are you where you are? Are you there because you followed somebody there? Are you there because you chose to be there? And it doesn't mean that because you followed somebody there, that's bad. It just means that it's good to know, right? It's good to know what were the choices that were involved in where you are, in what you choose to do, in what you choose to believe, and who you are. Were they made by you or were they made by somebody else?
Or did you make them based on limited information or limiting beliefs from your childhood?
Absolutely. And it's probably worth rethinking them, right? Because we change, right?
Yes, exactly. We get to make new choices.
We totally get to make we can make new choices at any point in time. Sometimes we feel like we get to a point where, oh, I'm too old to do that. Or I've done this too long, I can't do that. And that's a load of crap. You can change at any point in time.
I know a lot of women in their 50s now making big life pivots. It's really exciting to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It strikes me that you did something really beautiful with the information about your child questioning their identity. You took that, and instead of putting it on them or making it about them, you made it about you. You went in and explored yourself. And that's what I think is lacking in a lot of people who have more of a fixed mindset, is they're not willing to go in and look at themselves when they're faced with something that kind of shakes up their world. Mm-hmm. So I love that you did that.
I appreciate that. I think that it was certainly challenging to get used to, because one of those questions is in reading the book is that, like, I had always identified so strongly with being the mother of a daughter. Right. And so that was the initial question that I had to grapple with, is like, why? I'm still the parent of this cool ass kid who's this powerhouse, is doing this really neat stuff, and it's still the same, and it's such a cool kid. So why does it matter to me, the gender? Why is that? Why was I so identified with that? Right. And that was a really good question to dig into, which is all about my mother. But still, it was very powerful to think about that. Because those things, being fathers of daughters, fathers of sons, mothers of daughters, there's so much attached to that, right? There's so much identity stuff attached to that, right?
There is. I can imagine that would probably be the first thing that would have to grapple with as well if I were in that situation. It's really it's such an interesting vantage point, and the way that you talk about it and deal with it, it allows, I think, the reader to really open their mind on a subject that can be very polarizing. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated the way that you wrote about it. It really was beautiful.
Thank you.
Was there anything about your upbringing that prepared you to be the parent of a non-binary child?
What an interesting question. I think there are many things I can give my parents credit for, but one of the big ones was my parents have always been very much, you can do anything that you want to do. You can be anything that you want to be, but you need to take action and go do it. If they had any flaw, it was that they prioritized action over most things. But there are very few boundaries around what you should and should not do, aside from running into traffic and sticking your finger in a light socket. But when it came to life choices, though, I wasn't confined to say, you're a girl, so therefore you need to do girl things. Your brother can do this, but you can't do that. It wasn't like that in my upbringing. So I would say that was very helpful in many ways to understand that anything is possible. And I think that's very powerful. It's very powerful to look at the world in a way that says that anything is possible. Yeah. Just because you are not doing this doesn't not doing what you were told to do. A lot of people have the opposite. They have very, very like blinders on that say you can only do this and you can't do that. And there's challenges of both, right? Like in some ways that structure provides a path that is easy to see, is easy to understand, and easy to follow in some ways. And sometimes when you have no boundaries, it's indecision, right? Challenges because you could do anything. So there's pros and cons to both of it, but I think that it prepared me very well to be able to have the kind of career I've had, to be able to see my child's exploration in such a beautiful kind of open-minded way. Because again, like anything is possible.
Yeah, anything is possible. So can you tell us the story of how your child let you know about their final decision that they were going to identify in this way?
So my child has come out to me in mostly public places. And when
So you can't freak out?
I don't know if it's so I can't freak. Maybe it's so I can't freak out, but it's also like it's bubbling up in them, and so they have to express it. But when they first talked about feeling like they didn't identify as the gender they were assigned at birth, we were in the Penn Station in New York City. We had just seen, I think it was The Prom on Broadway. I think that's what the show was on Broadway. And so they were overcome with like emotion and all of this kind of stuff. And we were sitting in the train station and they just said, I don't think that I identify. In essence, they had said they don't identify. And I was like, okay. I didn't exactly know what to do with that. But in some ways it was monumental. And in some ways it was pedestrian, right? Because it was just an admission. And from there, the conversations flowed from there, right? And they took a long time to explore. I don't think that that was the time they came out with that. And that's a story I tell in the book. So it's not a secret. That was the moment that they expressed it first to me. But then I think there was a long period of time where it started to anchor in them, right? Like in many ways, it's not like you turn the light on one day, I think, and like everything has been decided and figured out. And I had the privilege of watching them explore what this meant for their life and become more confident in that over years. And it's so cool to look at them now and be like, damn, like, how cool is that you are so strong and so confident in who you are? It takes people a lifetime to figure that out.
Yeah.
But it started, like my understanding started at that moment in Penn Station.
Okay.
A lot of tears, a lot of snot, a lot of Starbucks napkins. Yeah, because they
are not very absorbent.
No, they're not. They're crying. I'm crying. We're having this conversation. It's a very powerful conversation and in front of everybody else who was there. So who knows? It might be like a part of somebody else's experience in Penn Station, witnessing it. But
yes. But how wonderful that you could just be there for your child to explore that without judgment and experience it together. They felt so safe in doing that with you.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think also that their experience of telling me it's different from my experience. One of the things that I've definitely learned is like, there's certainly moments where they've been like, yeah, you didn't say the right thing there, mom. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, because we're all human. So it's not like I did everything right, or I said everything right, or I was the perfect parent to navigate this transition by any means whatsoever. But I think I've just been open to it. And I've been open when they tell me that I'm wrong, because that's the other piece of it is that. And I think to our very early point that you started with about being a human on this earth with everybody is that sometimes we have to be able to be wrong and have somebody lovingly tell us, you know what, no, you're wrong. What you said hurt me this way. Can you please not do that? And I think we all need to be willing to be wrong a little bit more often.
So true. And to communicate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything leading up to this time that would have led you to believe that this was coming?
Not the gender part. Their first coming out, as we call it, when they identified as gay, they like to say as liking girls. That was much more of, at some point in time, they're going to tell me, but it was obvious because they're asking for books with queer storylines. They're like drawing pictures with two individuals of the same sex holding hands there. So there was a lot more that felt like we were leading down that road. And so when they came out the first time, they were a little bummed that I wasn't more surprised. And again, I tell that story in the book as well. So I'm not telling anything that isn't already public knowledge that they already have not said I can talk about. But yeah, so that one was a little bit more obvious. This one came out of the blue to me. I wasn't really prepared for this one. And I'm not exactly sure how you become prepared for these kind of things, but
just having an open mind and knowing that life can bring you anything at any moment. And it's usually there for your highest good. It's always there for your highest good.
Yeah. And if you love your child, like I always come back to that. It sounds maybe cheesy, but I always come back to the fact that like, this is the little human I love more than anything in this world. This is the human that I will do anything for. Right. And if this is what my human needs, then damn it, I figure out how to make it happen. Right. And it's my job to change. It's my job to adjust. It's not their job to adjust to me. Right. They are their own independent entity in this world, going their own route, as we all are. And if we want to be in this space together, then it's our job to work with each other to figure out how to make that happen. It's not my job to control their choices. It's not my job. That's not what parenting is. Parenting is not about controlling the choices of our children.
I love what you just said also before going into that, where all of this stuff is things that you've told. And the whole theme of your book is really about telling your story and whose story is it to tell, and making sure we're not overstepping by telling other people's stories. We have to tell them from our experience. And all of that is really important to note. But I do want to talk about one moment in the book, a story that you told there, where you were in a foreign country and it was hard to explain to the people in the country what was going on with your child. They could not understand the gender identity piece. And so you had to default in two different situations. One situation you had to default to male, and in the other situation you had to default to female. And you were flexible, and you and your child were both flexible on that. One was going four-wheeling in the desert, and the guy, he just could not understand this. He had to be teaching your son, your male child, how to drive. And in the other situation, it was about, I think, using the restroom with a woman who could not understand, and she needed your child to be female in that situation. How do you deal with all of that? The identity stereotypes, especially in another country?
Yeah, two things happened. One was Morocco and the other was Oman. And in the first situation, in both situations, my child and I had a conversation before we went, right? Because, if this comes up, we are going to default to what is on your passport. We are going to default to what legal, because we don't want to get into any situation about lying, like that kind of thing. And so can we agree as we go in this, that if there is any question about gender, that we are going to default to what is on your legal documents? And we had agreed about that ahead of time. But when we were in Morocco, they presented much more feminine. And when we were in Oman, they presented much more male. So that brought up different dynamics. And so walking around Morocco as a mother, a woman with a female child, we were treated very differently, right? Without a male escort. Walking around Oman, they presented so much more male that it never came up. Everybody always assumed that they were male, except one time when we were going to go tour the Grand Mosque, and I had brought a head wrap for my child and myself, and our guide didn't really understand what I was saying when I explained, because they would look at my child and be like, it's a boy. And I was like, they look like a boy, but they're actually, their passport says that. I was just like, that's why we have 2 head wraps. And finally he was like, they don't need a head wrap. And then my kid was so thrilled that they didn't need a head wrap. But from that moment on, the entire trip, they just presented as a boy. And so that story you're telling about when we went off-roading, we went off-roading with some guide in the middle of the desert, Omani desert somewhere. And he was offended that I had never taught my 14-year-old son how to drive yet. And so he grabbed my son, pretty much put him on his lap, and taught him how to off-road on the sand dunes, which of course, as you can imagine, would never be an experience that a 14-year-old girl will ever experience, right? Because he had his hands on my son and he was putting his foot on the brake and on the pedal and on the steering wheel, and they had a blast, right? They had a blast, but it was definitely a unique experience that my child got to have that they would never have had otherwise.
Yeah, it was an awesome experience. I wanted to do it when I was reading about it. It was so cool.
Me too.
Yeah, but just very interesting how you talk about the whole issue. And it really was very, very beautifully and poignantly presented. And really, I think I have a very open mind on the subject anyway, but it even opened my mind further because it got me to think about myself as how would I be the mother in that situation? And could I be as patient? Or would I turn into Mama Bear? But it really is just so admirable, the stories that you tell and the way that you've handled these things, because I'm sure it's very difficult at times.
Yeah, it is difficult. And I think I felt really, I had the luxury of being able to have an open conversation, dialogue with my child, right? Because I think that's another piece of that helped, is that they were willing to navigate this stuff with me in a way that made these experiences easier to navigate, right?
Yeah. And you said something interesting, that it wasn't your child's job to change to fit you. It was your job to change to fit their needs in that situation. But I want to bring it back to your career work and something that you say on your website, which I thought was interesting as well, but I want to explore it with you, that you say that people spend a good amount of time trying to change themselves to fit into things that just never feel quite right. And so I believe that's true, but I also believe what you just mentioned about this situation with your child is that sometimes you do have to change yourself, and that knowing when something is worth the change is a really interesting question. Yeah. And so can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, right? I think that when it comes to jobs, right, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to these kind of things, we do have a tendency to err on the side of other people's needs over our own, right? And that gets us into situations where we stay too long. We assume we're the problem, that we're at fault, that we're the one who always needs to change, before thinking more actively about what of this is ours and what of this is theirs, right? You know what I mean? What about the environment is no longer a fit? And what about us? Maybe we need to change, right? So it's a balance between those two things. But I think in general, as women specifically, we do have a tendency to assume we're the problem, to assume we're the ones, because we've been required to adapt. And we're good at it, right? We're great at adapting to other people's needs. That's partly how we've been conditioned and raised, broadly, culturally speaking, from a Western perspective, that is. So I think that often in those situations, it's important for us to understand, back to your self-reflection point, what is it that we want, right? And make sure that we're not always capitulating to what other people need. I think in a parenting circumstance, we need to let our children be who they're going to be. Right? When too often, I think, maybe not too often, but sometimes we assume that child is there to further our own goals, to take over our business dreams that we wanted, or to give us grandchildren, right? That they're, now that we've had a child, they are responsible to procreating for us? What? Isn't that absurd if you actually think about it? But those are the things that we say.
We do. It's true, but it's good to laugh at some of those things too.
But it's good to laugh at them. But I think it's important for us to think about that. They are not there for things. Our children are not there as things for us to control. They are their own human entity to make their own choices. Right?
Yeah, they're not our property.
They're not our property.
No. But it also makes me think about people that I know in my personal life who are very unhappy because they're constantly trying to force the world around them to change. And they can't. It won't change. They're miserable and they won't change themselves.
Yeah.
What do you say about when that comes up, that kind of a situation?
Yeah, I think we need to understand what is in our control and what is not in our control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can only change the things that are within our control. And we have this faulty sense that we have more control than we do. And so it's important to understand the distinction between those two things. So we have less control than we think we do, but we use less control than we have because we have 100% of our control of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So we can exercise all sorts of things when it comes to us and our choices and our actions and our beliefs, but we just can't control everybody else. And I think we spend a lot of time trying to control all the things that we can't control instead of focusing on the things that we can, which is us.
I think that's so true. And also, if we keep that kind of your earth crew mentality in mind, it helps you have a little bit more compassion for the outside world and things outside of yourself and think, okay, maybe this is here because it's trying to teach me something about myself.
Yeah. And maybe we can just think about, maybe today I'm going to be kind.
Yes.
I'm going to bump up against something that makes me uncomfortable. And maybe my choice today, because I can control me, is to be kind.
Exactly. Yes. You can always choose to be kind. Yeah. So your new books, Snowflakes, Zebras, and Fingerprints, which also have to do with identity. I love that. And I'm excited to read that. It's packed with practical tools for navigating career change, and along with the action steps to get you the job that you want and clear guidance for knocking down barriers that get in your way. This is what you say.
Yes.
But all of those words in the title are all alluding again to identity. So is there an identity twist in this book too?
I think that the big piece of identity is really understanding who you are, what you have to offer from a job perspective, and then how to communicate that, how to stand out, how to make yourself the expert in that thing so people can see you, right? And want you to have that job, right? So I think identity is a big piece of it. Understanding who we are is powerful, right? As a woman, it's super powerful to know what you have to offer, what you can provide, and how you can stand out, and then to self-promote that, right? It really helps you find that job. And this book is about how to do this, but it's also really about why doing that matters in the first place, right? Yeah. And so the first half of it is a personal story narrative about how this has shown up in my life, how work really did change my life, and those choices about what to do and how to get a job really did change the course of my life. And then it's the tactical steps for how you can do the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think this is going to be a great book. I can't wait to read that one. It just came out. Otherwise, I would have read it by now. So can you tell us, to end this conversation, what are your biggest lessons that you have learned in life?
Wow. One of the big lessons, I think one of the big lessons that I've learned in life is that relationships are the key to pretty much everything, whether it's work, whether it's life, whether it's just the people that you surround yourself with, the relationships. And that matters more than almost anything else, is like being connected. Not only does it help internally around navigating our own loneliness, but it also helps us get a job. Right? Like without our relationships, we're not going to find the kind of opportunities work-wise that you will with relationships. Right. So I think our lives are better when we prioritize people. So I think that's a big one. Yeah.
That's a good one. I heard this the other day and I thought it was interesting. Surround yourself, or it was not surround yourself. It was find someone who knows everyone. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when we talk about networking, we always talk about like one of the kind of people that you want in your network are super connectors, right? Those are people who know pretty much
everyone. Yes. Yeah. And what about your blessings? What are your biggest blessings in life?
Oh, my biggest blessings in life is my child, by far. Yeah, it is the one thing that has changed my life the most.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maryann. I love that we had this amazing conversation today. Your insights and your wit and your beauty, and you exude light. And it's really been a wonderful time talking with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. And I think everyone should get these 2 books and read them, because they will open your mind and change your perspective and help you to learn something about yourself along the way.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, everybody still listening. Will you go give a 5-star review to this podcast? Mitzi puts in so much effort and so much love into this. She's brilliant. She deserves it. So I am going to go right now. By the way, by the time you hear this and you go give your 5-star review, you should be able to go find my 5-star review of this podcast. But I just want to thank you for what you're doing.